Well, welcome to Advent, and welcome to Advent in lockdown or partial lockdown. And I don't know how you're spending your time. I'm watching far too much television. A lot of it, frankly, is not that inspiring. However, there's one program that's caught my attention. It's become quite a cult program and is drawing in a lot of viewers on television. It's called The Repair Shop. It began life as daytime television, but it's now migrated to a prime spot on BBC. And for those of you who haven't watched it or turned it on briefly and got bored by it, the idea is that people have at home cherished objects that have deep sentimental links to their past or their family's past, but they're in a dreadful state of repair. So these objects are brought to this old barn where they're met by experts in restoration, and be that leather or silver or jewellery or cuddly toys or old wooden toys or anything metal, anything wooden, anything leather. It's all sort of dealt with by these fantastic experts. And the idea is that they're met by nice people and they're treated beautifully, and the objects are restored and handed back, at which point the people usually burst into tears. I like it because everyone is nice to each other. Nobody swears at each other. There's no bad language. There's no violence. Nobody hits each other. Nobody shoots each other. Nobody betrays each other. Nobody has a bucket full of cockroaches poured over their head. It's all pleasant stuff, and that makes for a nice change in our modern world. And at the heart of it, I think, is the fact that we live in a throwaway society. Most of what we have will end up in a landfill site or being incinerated. Some of it will be recycled, not enough, but some. But what this programme looks at is that some things that are loved and shouldn't be thrown away. And they're to be met with love and patience and generosity, all of which, of course, are New Testament virtues. And there's just so much goodwill in that programme. So it's kind of suitable for Advent, which is all about preparing for the season of goodwill. Our Bible passage is quite interesting. The chapter begins with an abandoned woman, or whether she's widowed or just abandoned by her family, we're not really sure. And God meets her and says, hey, come on, start smiling, because life is just about to get really good for you. You've got a little tent you're living in, well, make it bigger, make it huge, because people are going to flood in and join you, and you're going to form a little community, a big community around about you, and it's a community of those who are blessed by God. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. You see, the world is not a throwaway item. It might have been easier for God to ditch the world and make a new one. I'm sure he could have done it, but he chooses not to, though he does consider it in the early chapters of the Bible. But God decides to redeem it and repair it. And we're now at one of the critical points where God announces in the book of Isaiah that his love has taken control of history. This love is going to change the world, and it's going to change this woman's world, and she represents the nations of the world. We're beginning to get the idea that it's not just about Israel, that people are going to flood in and join. These words in early Isaiah chapter 54, of course, form the basis of what is sometimes called the deathless sermon, preached by a Baptist minister, a shoesmith by trade, called William Carey, on March 30th, 1792. He'd been wittering on for years that the Baptists were too lethargic, too apathetic. They should be reaching out and changing the world, crossing cultural barriers to meet people and tell them about Jesus. And he got the chance to preach at this association meeting, and he let fly with these verses from Isaiah 54. And people were moved. He was certainly moved, because at the end of the meeting he asked the chairman to do something. So the chairman called people back. They were on their way to tea break or Victoria Sponge and scone break, whatever, I don't know. And they decided to have a further meeting, which took place in a house of a lady called Widow Wallace. House, by the way, is still there in Northampton. And a few days later they had their meeting, decided to club together and send someone, in fact it was William Carey himself, to India to share the good news of Jesus with those who lived there. They raised £13, 2 shillings and sixpence, recorded all in a notebook. The last time I saw that notebook, it was on display in the lobby of the Baptist Missionary Society, with each of their names and contributions there. And so began what we call the modern missionary movement, of Christians joining together and sending people out to cross cultural and ethnic barriers and share the good news of Jesus. Now, church numbers over 3 billion across the world, so I guess we can say it's been pretty successful. Verse 10 talks about the unfailing love for you will not be shaken. God is going to see his people through, and it's love that's going to do it. It's love that's going to create it. Verse 10 rather prophesies the fact that love is at the heart of it. And verse 5 kind of changes the image. And now verse 5 says, your maker is your husband. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. And now the imagery is completely changed. The New Testament is going to pick this up, and it's going to talk about the church being the bride of Christ, the loved of Christ. And to bring this about, a son is given. Another verse from Isaiah, and to us a son is given. And this is Jesus, of course. So the people of God in the New Testament imagery taken from this Old Testament passage is the church is the bride of Christ. And it will involve all nations. It's multi-ethnic, multicultural, multilingual. And it's wonderful. It's a mishmash of people. It's the idea of people just pouring in and being made room, and the tent getting bigger and bigger as folk join it. Getting a hold of it is quite difficult because it's so diverse. One way is this sort of modern fairy story, or futuristic fairy story. I don't know what you make of this. You might think it's a load of nonsense, but I like it. It kind of gives the idea of the church, and it goes like this. Once upon a time there was a bride, and all the local people gathered around to see her arrive at the church. They loved a good wedding, and word had got about that she was something special. A royal wedding, some people whispered. The groom, they said, was reckoned to be none other than the most important person in the universe, although most folk laughed at the idea of there being anyone that important. The crowd grew, folk straining to see over each other's head and catch a glimpse of, in capital letters, the most beautiful woman in the world, at least according to the rumours. There was a murmur of expectation till she climbed out of the white vintage Rolls Royce. Then they all burst out laughing. There were shrieks and catcalls, sarcastic wolf whistles and whoops of disbelief, and not to mention the rude remarks. There were plenty of those. I mean, the dress, for a start. It was a patchwork. Listen to me. It was a patchwork. Getting married in a patchwork dress? Sort of Versace meets ragdoll. Remnants of white, pink, blue, checks, stripes, spots, and each reminiscent of a different culture. There was a gypsy, high fashion, Marks and Spencer, kimono, sari, and you will love this, even a touch of Hawaiian grass skirt. She walked barefoot, as if she couldn't find shoes to match, but that wasn't the reason, no. She was barefoot because she was poor, although bits of her looked well off in a tacky sort of way. She was not a high-class girl in anyone's books. The nearest she was likely to get to joining high society was to do their laundry for them. And the girl herself, well, seriously weird. The skin colour matched the dress, same sort of patchwork colours. A feature seemed to blend every ethnic group into one body. I guess if you kept looking and thinking about it, you could see a kind of beauty in her, but she mixed so many cultures and races and styles you could never quite work out what she was. Not that she cared. She walked purposefully towards the door of the church from where the groom emerged suddenly to receive her. Now, he genuinely was something to behold. The crowd fell silent. He was special, even down to those strange scars on his hands, and very clearly pleased to receive his bride. The crowd began to feel left out, as if they wished they'd accepted the invitation they'd been sent. The bells rang out, of course. The bells, a fusion of classical, rock, Latin, Asian, and some swore they detected a few bars of hip-hops. Whatever. The couple entered the church just as the clock chimed 12 and an angel read aloud from the Bible. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. Yep, we're one of God's patchwork pieces. We've been put together from all around the world, and we're going to celebrate all around the world the coming of our Messiah. It's like in the repair shop, but it begins with the door opening and people stepping through, coming to glimpse the repair. And it's so patient. That's what I love about the repair shop. These experts spend hour upon hour upon hour, whereas I'd throw it away. I'd give up and go into town and buy a cheap version in Sports Direct or Primark or whatever. No, they don't do that. They spend hours and hours and hours patiently and meticulously restoring these items that otherwise would have been thrown away. And that really is what Advent's all about. Stepping into that barn, bringing before God the world that's a messy and it's difficult. It's a world that's hard to realise. People have struggles with the Old Testament. It's just because the Old Testament is real. The Old Testament admits that the world is full of violence and betrayal and anger and bad words. But the Old Testament also says there's redemption which runs through it like a thread, and that thread becomes real and visible in the birth of the Messiah in a stable in Bethlehem.